Welcome to Talaterra, a podcast about freelance educators working in natural resource fields and environmental education. Who are these educators? What do they do? Join me, and let's find out together. This is your host, Tania Marien. Today my guest is Kellie Cox, Botanical Muralist, artist, and teacher. Kellie's specialty is encouraging an interest in horticulture and native plants through public art. How does Kellie get her projects? What type of community partnerships has she formed? Where can you see Kellie's art in person? Let's find out. Thank you, Kellie, for joining us today and for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you for having me.
If you could introduce yourself to listeners.
Sure, absolutely. My name is Kellie Cox. I am a botanical muralist and artist. I'm also a landscape designer, so I have a kind of dual trade that I do in my career and everyday life.
We first spoke in 2013. Well, online. It was the first time I interviewed you and talked to you about your work. And you called yourself then a natural scientific artist. But I see people in news articles and all that describe you different ways. And so which way do you prefer?
I think my work has kind of progressed over time. And so I think I've kind of gone more on the lines of a more impressionistic style. I do enjoy both scientific aspect, but also the impressionistic style. So I have thought in depth about what I should call myself. And it ends up being, I think, just a broader range of like a botanical muralist and artist. And then I throw in sometimes, landscape designer or horticulturalist, depending on the project that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, we all evolve, and how we describe what we do evolves. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. You have been involved in horticulture or some plant-related form of education for a very, very, very long time. And so I was wondering how you came to this line of work. And so I would like to ask you, what is your earliest memory of enjoying nature?
Sure. I actually have been doing gardening since I could stand. My parents and my grandparents were both very involved in aspects of horticulture. My mom ran a dried and fresh floral business, and she used to have it out of her house. And so we used to have people come to the house all the time, and we'd work on drying flowers and cutting them. And it was quite a different and a wonderful type of experience growing up in that world and being around nature and plants all the time. And I remember when I was very little working next to our detached garage, and we had this really interesting little plot behind a fence, and I would just create whatever garden I felt like doing and kind of exploring. And so we'd go to the garden center and buy plants, and I would plant pansies, and I'd even do like little stone steppers. And it was so fun just to see like how these plants grew and just watching them. And I remember morning glories growing on the fence, and it was just such a great experience for me. And my mother being an artist and my grandmother as well, we would then go inside, and then I would draw what I'd seen outside. And they taught me, how to draw flowers. And of course, at that time, it wasn't very good, but but it was so fun, just that type of life and just connecting with nature at such a young age.
Yes, sounds like a very nice upbringing to have all that around you all the time.
Very much.
Yeah. When did you realize that nature was important to you?
I think in high school, I realized, as a child and even a preteen, you kind of don't think about those things. Maybe some people do, but I was, living in my own world, the free responsibility, which was nice. And in high school, I started thinking about what I wanted to do for career and for college. And, my first instinct was to go for art. And my parents sat me down and they said, it's a hard living, as we know. And so you want to really start to think about the career you want to do. And at that point, I realized maybe I should go work at a garden center and see what that's like. And maybe there's some opportunity there. And I had no idea that horticulture could be a career. and nature like surrounds us and just the connection. I just kind of saw it as these fun things I could play with. And I don't know, something just a light switch turned on and I was like, oh, this is like something bigger than I thought it was.
Mm-hmm. When we spoke in 2013, you had just started working as a full-time artist. Actually, you mentioned in that interview that just 2 weeks prior to the interview, you had started working as a full-time artist and a freelance landscape designer. Are you still working this way?
I'm slightly different. Soon after that, I moved down to Washington, D.C., and life is a little different down here. And I worked in various gardens down here. I was briefly, or for actually quite a while, a director of a historic garden in Georgetown, DC, and I did a lot of my related work there. And so now I work as a full-time landscape designer and then also doing all of my side artwork. So it's kind of pretty much online with on and off what I've been doing over these years.
I've read that you describe your freelance career as your nights and weekend career.
Yes.
And so how long have you been a nights and weekends professional?
Since at least, when I got down to DC, it turned into my nights and weekends. And being a new mom now, I'm finding like, oh yeah, that's like really ringing true. When I put the baby down, I'm like, okay, time to do some painting or, and during the night. And yeah, so for at least the last, I guess, 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And was becoming a freelancer a conscious career choice or a reaction to an event, something you wanted to change or something you wanted to do?
I think, it kind of gives you more flexibility, I think, being freelancing in this world. And it makes it a bit more enjoyable too, because as my day job being a landscape designer, I still have a ton of creativity and it really is an amazing outlet for my mission of, the work that I do. But I find like I can be a bit more creative and enjoy the work being more of a freelancer.
Mm-hmm. And what's the difference between what you believed it was going to be like and what it really is like? Because we all start this with particular ideas in our head. And has it played out for you the way that you hoped it would?
I think it has, and it always seems to surprise me. I'll have one week where I'm like, oh, I'm not doing enough, or, and then all of a sudden I'll just end up making a connection with someone or end up thinking of a project. And that really kind of drives me to start a whole new, pathway in my freelancing. And I feel like it's always a good surprise. And I think I feel like I'm settling in more to it, which is good. So I think it's a positive thing. So yes, I think it is in a good way, somewhat of what I expected, but in a good way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. You call your freelancing your nights and weekends career. Okay. But you have a very busy and full nights and weekends career. You have done so much community work and so much public art. It's really amazing. I mean, everything. We're from a recycling truck, which is fantastic. This monster truck.
Yes, it is.
Gorgeous. Teaching, murals in Ithaca, New York, seed packets. It's really something. And you have your store, of course, on Etsy and on Society6 and lots of tempting, wonderful, products to choose from. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, where do I start? And so, when we first spoke, you were doing utility boxes. Mm-hmm. In Ithaca. You had painted that, and that was new. And you were wanting to do more public art like that, more murals. And so can you give us an overview of the types of public art that you have done over the years?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty fun to look back and be like, oh my God, look at all the things I've done. It feels good. I'm happy about it, and I'm excited to do more. The murals that I've done, as Ithaca is a really special place, and they're really supportive of my work. And I just can't thank the whole community enough for just liking my work and letting me paint on their walls. I'm still like surprised. I'm like, it's very heartwarming. And so Ithaca, it's a little easier than other cities to be able to really get involved. When I was there, living there, I was kind of at the beginning of it all where murals were just starting to pop up. So I was able to kind of get my foot in the door and work with a lot of really wonderful people, including a man named Caleb who runs kind of the nonprofit Ithaca Murals program there now. And he works in conjunction with the city. And so the process that I've done is coming up with these concepts and showing them to the city and to local residents and businesses, and either running through grants or doing fundraisers online for the support of them. And so throughout, the last, I guess, 6 years, some of my time in Ithaca doing installations. And then in Washington, D.C., I've done a fair amount of residential murals, actually. The city itself, D.C., is really hard to get public murals installed because it's hard in the bigger city. But I really enjoyed the work that I've done, especially for the residents. And I think it kind of either creates a deeper connection with the residents having this original piece of artwork in their backyard or on their house or inside their house. And I randomly now have a few vehicles that have my art, like the recycle truck, which is really such a joy because it still drives around the city, and about every few months I'll see it drive by. And last time I just got so excited, I waved the truck driver and I stopped and I go, "Oh, that's my art." And they gave me a big hug, and it was really sweet. And so it's been such a joy to be able to share my artwork with the public. And I have a lot of feelings about why it's really important to me, which I can share with you.
Yeah, no, of course. No, go ahead, share. Mm-hmm.
I think the murals are so great. Public murals are fantastic because they really connect with the community. And I think it's so fun because the mural that I did 6 years ago, I still have people email me about, and I'll still see on like social media and people sharing the photos. And it's such a unique way to reach our community and a message. And it kind of lasts a very long time, as long as, the people like the mural, they keep it up. And so I always think of the big Black-Eyed Susan's mural I did in downtown Ithaca. And that's become this landmark in Ithaca. And I've had people tell me their stories like, "Oh, I would always tell my friends to meet me at this Black-Eyed Susan's downtown," and it creates this really unique kind of community within the community, I guess, where people really start to think about plants and horticulture in this kind of world of public art. And I think it's very important for that. So I can kind of share that message of native plants. And, for even like little kids who stop by the mural and they go, "Oh, what's the Black-Eyed Susan?" And I didn't realize it could be this cool looking, and it just really, it kind of just puts that thought in the brain for people like, "Oh, maybe I should plant these plants in my home." And, I think it's a unique way to kind of spread that message of why native plants are important, and even not only their potency, but just how beautiful they are and how you can have them grow in your garden.
Mm-hmm. Now, I was wondering, especially in Ithaca, and there are so many murals there. Mm-hmm. I only know and have experienced one other mural town. It's a desert town where there's lots of murals. So many murals that the Historical Society does field trip tours of these murals. But when you do a mural, do you, is there an interpretive plaque, some type of sign that explains what it is, or, brings attention to it being a local plant, a species, a local scene, or some type of historical perspective?
Most of the ones I've done have not, because some public spaces are really particular about signage and how, I think that gets a little deeper into the public aspect. But a few murals, I did do these, what I call portable murals for Cornell University. They're in their plant science building. They have descriptions of them and the plant material and why the specific plants are chosen within the murals, which I think is really important. I think it's a great idea to be able to kind of have some more information with the murals saying, this is this plant, this is why it's important. But even the titles of the murals are the plant names. So I have a bloodroots mural, and I think so many people have never heard of what a bloodroot is. And I hope people will go and explore either at a garden center or just go online and say, "Oh, what's a bloodroot?" And, "Oh, it's an actual, woodland wildflower. And even in my mural, I have a little ant painted that's carrying the seed, and that's how they're most commonly spread in the forest are by ants. And some people, just those little details to kind of teach people. But yes, I'm trying to think of a few other projects. The recycle truck actually has a plaque on there explaining the whole project, which is pretty neat. So people, when they're getting their recycling picked up, they're able to read it, which is fun.
Now, the other vehicle that I saw was the flower van.
Yes.
And how does the city use that flower van?
It's amazing. It just takes that message of creating beauty within our landscapes even further, which I just absolutely love. So it's part of with this program called the Beautification Brigade, which is Cornell's cooperative extension. They're a nonprofit that goes around the city of Ithaca beautifying these public spaces with plants and beautiful florals and even edibles. And for instance, they converted the mayor's parking spot into a little garden. Which is amazing. And so they contact me because they really enjoyed my murals and public art. And so I painted their van for them. And it's so fun because we have this amazing symbiotic relationship with each other, because they go and then they plant plants and florals and beautiful all sorts of things around my murals. And so it brings this extra level of beauty with this public art. And so every year you'll see a whole cluster of Black-Eyed Susans planted around the Black-Eyed Susans mural, and they'll just, they're amazing. And that van is very fun. People love getting pictures of that van.
That's wonderful that you work with them that way.
Mm-hmm,
yeah,
very much.
And that so they, sweet. Yeah. Oh, how nice.
Yeah,
nice.
It is really special.
Wow. How do you paint a van? Do you use car paint, or you take acrylic to it, or what do you do with it?
So that van was made out of metal, so I was able to use exterior, Weatherall metal paint. And so the first thing you do is to get the varnish off of the van originally. So we sanded the whole thing down, and then you put on a primer, which is exterior metal paint. And then the design I put on, and then about 3 layers of varnish on there. And so I painted that a few years ago, and it's still bright as it was the day that I did it, which is really fun.
Now, with your van and with all of your murals and all of your public art, do you go back to touch things up? Do they weather?
They weather really well. I mean, they hold up in the weather, I should say, really well, because I use the exterior Weatherall paint and many layers of varnish. I've talked to a couple of people in Ithaca, just asking them how the murals are going. And they say they're still really bright and look great, which is good. But I think I'll plan at some point to update some of them once they start. But that exterior Weatherall paint, can stay fresh for a very long time, which is nice. So
yeah. Your images are so vibrant. They're so bright. And so I was wondering, wow, these must wear, because there's all sorts, there's more weather there than there is here in Southern California. And so I was wondering, how does all that hold up?
Yes, and that is another fun part of the murals being in Ithaca, is it really just brings color to a very dark winter that they can have there sometimes. So,
Wow, that's amazing. All right, so you've done murals, lots of wonderful public murals, and you also do large public art in terms of in exhibitions.
Yes, that's correct.
As well. And so you had a year-long, you participated in a year-long exhibition last year at the United States Botanic Garden in Washington, D.C., and that was your second showing there, because you were there for the exhibition that celebrated the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. And you, in last year's exhibition, not only did you have a large piece, you also painted the planters.
Yes, I did.
Right? Yeah. And so when you do an exhibition like that, do you develop programming to go with your piece, and how does that work exactly?
Yes. So the folks at the U.S. Botanic Gardens are really wonderful, very creative, and they always have something going on every year, and they're really great to work with because they're interested in my ideas and thoughts, and really it's all about the public there. And so it really ties into reaching the public and education. And so last year during the show, the Wallflowers Botanical Murals, I did a series of workshops, public workshops, where the public can just come in for free. And we painted, we did the program, it's called Upcycled Mini Murals. And so what I did is kind of interesting and different. My parents, being very eclectic as they are, I'm sure they'll appreciate me saying that about them. They really enjoy collecting old pieces of wood and furniture, and like they're always like have something different. And so one of my dad's very good friends had these very old pieces of barnwood, and so I've been collecting them. And you know, I go out with my parents, we try to find old just pieces of wood that aren't being used any longer. And so I collected this. And so I brought it into the U.S. Botanic Gardens. And so we created these mini murals on these upcycled material, which was so fun because the idea was to really show them that, you know, I wanted to be able to have the students create murals, and it was kind of hard to be like, okay, how do we do that? Where do we get walls? You know, the logistics were a little harder for that. And so I came up with the idea, I would love for them to be able to bring home like a little mini mural of their own. and to be able to put it outside. And so I came up with the idea of being able to use these materials and reuse them, and to be able to create these masterpieces on there. And so brought in the wood, and then we went, and the U.S. Botanic Gardens had provided various plant studies for us. And throughout I think it was 4-hour sessions throughout the workshop, we learned about the plants, looked at the details of them, and then we painted them into these little mini mural structures using exterior wood paint. Most of the materials wood. I also built some of these canvases, I guess call them canvases, from old pieces of wood, and also I'm sorry, forgetting the name of the pallets thing. Old pallets I would make using and creating these mini murals from. And the students loved it. They really just enjoyed it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, was that all ages, students of all ages? Or?
Yeah, we tried to gear it towards the adults more because it was such a long class, but we ended up having a lot of kids come too with their parents, which is really fun. So, and people were just amazed that like, oh my God, I can create this piece of artwork that I could just put in my garden, or even just put on the front of my house or in my door. And they got really excited, and they talked about, oh, I have this shed, and it really kind of opened their eyes, and they're like, oh, I didn't realize there was so much wall space to be available for painting murals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of your murals is like the size of a house, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So my next question is for listeners: how do you plan something like that?
Oh, it's interesting. I always describe it to people, and I actually get that question a lot, like, how do you paint a mural and that scale? And I just visualize it as a large piece of paper. And I see my boundaries, and I say, okay, so I just see the composition of how everything needs to be laid out, and I go and paint.
Yeah. That's amazing to me, because your image on the recycling truck started out as ink on paper, right? And the original was what size?
I actually have it right there, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can show you if you want.
Okay.
Just so you can see. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All righty. Yeah.
So it's 24 by 36. And then it changed into this big truck.
Yeah. And that was painted as well, or was that wrapped?
That was wrapped. Yeah, that was the final wrap.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because the layout of it, having to lay out how the vinyl would be created, because all the little joints in the truck and how exactly where the flowers would hit was a really unique experience, and something I never really thought about. But it worked out well.
Yeah. Did you have to do a lot of adjusting?
Somewhat, just kind of seeing like where the flowers, where they lay out. Because, I still try to think of the overall composition, because I wouldn't want, certain things cut off in a weird way. And it's a very unique canvas for sure.
Mm-hmm. What are you working on now?
So I am working on, let's see. So I am planning a project to go up, back up to Ithaca next spring to do what I kind of coining like a mural house tour, where we're trying to get a collection of the residents of Ithaca and have me install murals on the outside of their homes, which is really fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so we're reaching out to certain residents that may want that. And so we're speaking with them and trying to see what they're interested in. You know, maybe they have a favorite type of native plant or something that they've never even heard of before that they would like on their house. And so later this year, I'll be starting a fundraiser up in order to support for the supplies and just travel to go and then paint these murals on several people's houses.
Okay. And so will you be using one of the funding platforms or a different
I believe
type of fundraiser?
so. I think I'll do an online fundraiser for that because I feel like it reaches people pretty easily. And then just kind of campaigning, just talking with people through the internet and friends. And
Okay. And which platforms have you used, or do you have a preference?
you know, I've done it a few times, and a few times I've just ran it directly through my website because I find it's easier. But I've used Hatch Fund, which is the artist-run like online fundraiser program, which I really like because they really give you advice on how to fundraise and you know suggest like, oh, maybe you should do video or something. And I think there's a few others, but that's the main one that I've used or just doing it. And I know Ithaca Murals is like an official kind of program now, and Caleb runs, and he does donations and runs like these mini fundraisers for that as well.
Mm-hmm. And your fundraising is successful. I assume you have many projects.
Yes, which is great. I did run a fundraiser, I remember, for the Blood Roots mural. I actually sold my artwork for the mural installation. So I had people come to my house, and then I did like a mini exhibit. And then I just sold my artwork, and then all those funds just went right for the paint supplies.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. And, you know, I can see why those fundraising events are successful for you, because I have to say, you do a very good job at showing your work.
Thank you. I appreciate
on your website. And so people know exactly who you are, what you've done. And that is so important as an independent professional to show your work.
It is. It really is. And because it takes a lot of, I think, trust and confidence for someone to hire you to do your work. Because even I remember starting some of these public murals, and people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" and kind of give me a weird look when I first started. I'm like, "Don't worry, it's not done yet." So I think it really does, you know, people have to have a lot of trust. And I want to show people the work that they would be getting. So yeah, I'm glad that you see that.
Yeah. And then those fundraising campaigns work because you already have a following and you already have established that trust.
Yes.
And you know, demonstrated you're reliable and, you know, the message that you want to get out. And what message do you want to get out? Does it change with each mural? I would assume to some extent, the message is different a little bit each time. A little
bit. For the most part, I really am striving to just get people interested more in horticulture and in gardening, because I think it is important, vital, and just really good for yourself. And I love it so much. And I think that people can find happiness and peace in gardening and wherever they can, even if it's, you know, inside in their little, if they have an apartment, or find a community garden where they can work, or, you know, if they have a big plot, rethinking how they use their landscape and really thinking about creating that landscape, not only for yourself, but for the environment. It is so important, even nowadays, to be able to have native plants for our local ecosystem. And as so many people know in this world, how important it is. And just sharing that message, I think, even if it's baby steps, I see it, you know, if it's just a pretty flower, at least they'll get some thinking.
Yeah.
Like, oh, maybe I should plant this, you know, what's this ranunculus, or what's this other flower? Maybe I should plant it in my garden. And, you know, I think it's always good to get people involved. I still meet people, even like so many people I still meet who are like, "Oh, I just started gardening," and they're in their 50s. And I'm like, "What have you been doing your whole life?" You know, but I think it's better late start late than ever. So I'm happy to be able to get people to start to think about that.
When you paint a building, whether the owner is the person you're working with is the owner, like the houses that you will be painting in the future, or a public building, whoever owns that building, be it the city or somebody else. What type of an agreement do you have? Is there a pre-established length of time that your murals are up? Do they let the murals live their life, their natural life? I mean, what type of an arrangement is
It's
involved?
a good question. It's something I thought of, I think of a lot because each is so different. I had a mural I installed for a business in Ithaca indoors, and the person was just renting the space. And soon after, the store ended up leaving that space, and then the new owner just painted over it. So, it's those kind of things get a little sad, but some places, depending on who the client is or, who the person is, really, I think some of my murals in downtown Ithaca being so public, the city kind of oversees them and makes sure that they'll stay there for a long time as long as the city continues to be happy with them, which I think they are. There's some people, I think, the trucks, they have their lifespan to them because they're trucks, so they get a lot of wear and tear to them. But usually, the idea is to try to just make it last as long as possible because, I want to share that beauty with the public and the people.
Yeah. What does a typical week look like for you?
Oh, well, my last 2 months have been a little crazy.
Well, yeah.
But I'm going back to work next week, actually, which is fun. And so my day-to-day, I'm doing my landscape design work for Ginkgo Gardens. And so I'm meeting with clients throughout DC and discussing and designing their gardens, which is super fun, and I love it. And that is such an avenue that I'm able to reach people and really just push the idea of creating a native garden, a native landscape as much as possible. Even just incorporating some natives, I think, is very important. And edibles as well. People love, learning about edibles and being able to, how they can use their garden to be able to grow the plants that they can eat. So that's my day-to-day. And then throughout the day, it's so great because then I'm getting inspired by being in these gardens and seeing what plants are coming in. Where I work at Ginkgo Gardens is also a full garden center right in downtown Washington, D.C. So we have tons of plants coming in all the time. And it's just so great to see what plants are coming in this week and just being inspired by those. And then just thinking about my projects, my nights and weekend life. And, being like, I had no idea this type of echinacea came in that color. It's great just being surrounded by nature and life and being able to connect both my worlds together.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you do that so well and so beautifully. It's seamlessly, it seems. You manage your time very well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You really do. In the past, have you done artist in residence? Have you done any artist residencies?
No, I haven't. I always thought about it, but life kind of just never, I always felt like I never really had the opportunity to, I guess, which is weird. But I think life commitments, I could never leave my husband that long.
Yeah.
Though we talked about, before we had a baby, we talked about doing something because he's a writer and he's an amazing writer, and so creative writing. And so we talked the idea about, maybe we should do an artist residence together or something, but it just never came to fruition. But it's fun because we have our space in our house and we're able to find creativity within our own lives, which is nice. And maybe in the future, 20, 30 years.
Well, I hope not that long.
Yeah.
You designed the cover of his book.
I did. Yes. Yeah. Yes. He was nice enough to let me do that.
And how does that creative process work compared to your designing large murals?
I think, his writing is so descriptive, and it's really interesting because he would always incorporate very descriptive things in his book, especially about plants in his book, even before we started dating. So it's like this amazing thing, and that was just part of him that we were able to connect on. And so one of his novels that he wrote was about blue roses, and that was so easy for me to be able to create something for him. And even I had just done a drawing for him of his story, not knowing that he would use it for his cover, actually. So it ended up being just kind of a coincidence. But so that's how that came about.
Oh, well, but that is fun.
Yeah,
That
it
is
is.
lots of fun.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we enjoy collaborating with each other and doing those kind of things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Freelancing comes with its ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
You've been a full-time freelancer, and now you are, nights and weekends professional.
Mm-hmm.
That also is a full life, and it can have sometimes ups and downs. What has been any obstacles in particular that you have sage advice that you would like to share with others?
I think, I felt it more recently because being pregnant, I'm like, I can't like pack in my life of murals and installations. I even did a mural when I was 4 months pregnant in Pauling, New York, and getting on a ladder, I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't maybe do this for much longer. So I kind of felt this emptiness of that life for a while because I wasn't going out and trying to get work. And so I kind of, thinking about it, I'm like, oh, why aren't I doing jobs? And I'm like, oh yeah, because I can't. But I think life can keep you busy, and it's always good to try to keep yourself creative in any aspect that you can, and trying to find projects and work, especially when you're not in doing something for a while. I think that you kind of get forgotten about. And so trying to reconnect with people, and it's, I try to be creative as much as I can when creating jobs and finding work, because it's really hard out there. I apply for 50 to 100 different projects a year that I get, a note for, and it's really hard being a freelancer.
Okay, these projects that you apply for, these are all public projects, they're grants. I mean,
Both, yeah.
Who are you reaching out to?
Yeah, cities. So cities will put, RFQs, RFPs, whatever they're called, for artists to do specific projects like painting on the side of a building. And they're so specific, and sometimes they're just not, looking for that type of style. And so I think it takes a lot of creativity to really connect with someone and come up with the project on your own, because otherwise, I've spent like countless hours just applying for projects, and I find I end up being more successful, and I'm just networking and talking with people. And so I encourage other freelancers to do the same, and just, networking with friends in the, career world. And just, there's nothing wrong with, writing an email to someone out of the blue, just saying, hey, I saw your building. It would be great for a mural. Would you like this idea? So, yeah, I find I'm more successful in that way.
Would it be difficult? I don't know. How difficult do you think it would be to launch your own project, like within a school district or something?
You mean like
your own murals project, like approach a school district and say, within this district, utilizing the schools in this district, we're going to tell a story about this?
I think it depends on the school and the district and who's running the place. I find it's so different for every different kind of organization or even just group of people that I approach. And, some people are just like, their mission is like this specific thing and just message in their life. And so sometimes it's not plants at all. It's something else, which I think, other messages are great as long as they're not, harassing or terrible messages.
Yeah.
But, there's certain goals in these kind of different areas, especially in DC, who have different missions. And so I try to find those groups of people. I've done some signage for like these school gardens in DC. So that kind of thing, I think, really kind of works well with my work. But yeah, I think it just depends on getting the right person to, answer your messages and get excited enough, and just depending on how you approach and kind of, depending on funding too. So there's a lot that goes into it. But yeah, I don't think it ever hurts to try.
Yeah. No, there are always a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? With every idea and every project.
Mm-hmm.
What type of mural would you like to do that you haven't done yet?
I think a lot about doing even bigger murals.
Okay, I've seen the pictures. How big do you want to go?
Like 20 story tall buildings. Oh. Like I want to do big. My sunflowers have kind of been this really popular thing recently, especially the big sunflower painting I had on exhibit at the U.S. Botanical Gardens. It's a very unique kind of style that I think people have described it as. And I would love to do something like that, but on a super large scale. And those take time, those paintings that I do, but it would just be really amazing. And I say bigger the better.
Okay, bigger the better. What would be too big, do you think?
Oh, nothing.
Nothing? There's nothing that would say, okay, maybe not this one.
No, yeah, I would love it. I love a challenge.
When you paint your murals, do you do them yourself? Do you have a team with you that helps?
So far, I've done pretty much every mural on my own. My husband helps me with moving materials sometimes. I did this really cool Southern Magnolia mural in Ithaca, and he didn't come with me, but he helped me load up the car, I remember, which is really nice on my way up. And, a lot of the people who end up, like, if it's for a private residence or for a business, they end up helping me a lot too, which is nice. But usually my husband helps me. He's like my art and garden assistant, which is very sweet of him. Like when I was painting the big sunflower painting for the Botanical Gardens, he helped set up a tarp outside, and he's very sweet.
Where can listeners find you online?
They can find me on my website, or they can find me. I'm pretty active on Instagram. I like sharing pictures of my art and also of, my garden inspirations, being out in the garden, practically every day. I'm always sharing photos of fun pollinators and, all the different butterflies I see on, the anise out front and everything. So, I think Instagram's a good way to connect with me.
Okay. And what is your Instagram handle?
It's Kellie Cox Artist.
Okay. And where can listeners see your work in person?
Sure. Well, if they're in Ithaca, they could see a lot of different places there. Downtown, I forget the street name, but right downtown on the Commons is my big Black-Eyed Susans mural. Around the corner from that, the Bloodroots, as well as my utility box. Up in College Park and at Cornell, I have a variety of murals up there. Washington, D.C., they could see my recycle truck driving around. And actually a lot of residential. I've done a lot of residents here. So those you'd have to kind of just drive around to go see. Being residents is a little harder. But so, yeah, those kind of work. I've done a few in Delaware where I'm from. So in Newark area as well. And in Pawling, New York, I did a really fun sunflower mural there recently. And yeah, just looking to do even more.
If you are in the Washington, D.C. area, you will also have the opportunity to see Kellie's work this month at the Crafty Bastards Arts and Makers Festival in Buzzard Point, D.C. on September 28. To learn more about Kellie, to view her projects, and to explore resources mentioned during our conversation, visit the show notes for this episode at talaterra.com. Talaterra is a podcast for and about independent educators working in natural resource fields and environmental education. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with friends and colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Tania Marien.